Today I wanted to show you how I use and store watercolor tube paints when I don't want to keep them in my main palette as I have with these colors. So I like to work with watercolor paint from dry rather than fresh from the tube. I feel like there's less waste when you use them that way. And I've recently bought these granulating paints from Mission and I don't want to put them into my main palette. So I have a palette here of half pans. There's 52 half pans here, and I'll show you how I keep track of these paints. So aside from my watercolor paints, I'll also be using a fine point Sharpie, an Archival Ink Pen, and a round brush. This is a small round from Princeton Heritage. So I'll take these half pans out of the palette. They can be pretty tricky to get out sometimes, but to me that just shows that I know they're not going to fall out when they're full of paint, so I don't really mind too much. Now, using the Sharpie, I will write the brand of paint on one side and the color of the paint on the other side. So I like to do all of the labeling first before I decant the paints. And even though I'm using a permanent marker, the half pan plastic, it's very smooth, so sometimes I do notice that the labeling will come off over time, and I'll just go back in and label it again so that I'm not losing that brand or that paint color. So once all of the half pans have been labeled, I like to line them up with my paints so that I make sure I'm using the correct half pan for the correct paint color that I have labeled. Now I'm just squeezing out the paint into the half pan, so this is pretty straightforward. Sometimes if I feel like there's a lot of air pockets, I can use a toothpick to get rid of those air pockets. This is a really thick paint, so you'll notice some colors are a lot thinner, some of them are a lot thicker. And it's not only just brand to brand, sometimes it's color to color. So once I have decanted all of this paint into these half pans, I do like to tap them on the desk just in an effort to again try and reduce some of the air bubbles that maybe I can't see. So here I am, I'm just giving them a pretty decent tap on my desk. Now I've only filled these up, not completely full. I do need to leave these to dry for a few days and the paint will shrink. So sometimes I go in and add another layer, but I don't mind going back in and topping up the paint when I need to. So this is my swatch card for this palette. So I have an area to swatch the colors and I also have numbers. And on the back I have a grid where I will again add some more numbers here, and then I'll add the brand and the paint names for that corresponding area of the palette. So here I'm just going in first with all of the brand names, and then I'll go in and add the color names. Once that is all done, then I'll grab my paintbrush, and while this paint is still fresh from the tube, I'll go in and I'll complete my swatches. So I don't really bother waiting for all of this paint to dry just to do a swatch. I guess it's personal preference. I don't mind just doing these swatches straight from the tube. I'm just mindful to not pick up a large amount of pigment on my brush because I don't want to waste any of that paint. So I'm just swatching the last of these paints here, and that is basically how I use these watercolor tube paints. So I'll let those half pans dry before I put them back in the palette, just so I don't, accidentally get paint everywhere. As for storing the watercolor tubes, I have a container just from like the $2 store. And this one is divided into segments, and I usually try and keep, the same brand in the same area. These are my only mission paints, so I'm just going to put them along with some of these Royal Talens paints that I have. But I think this is a really handy way to store paints, and if I ever need to top up the half pans, I can just pull the tube out and top them up. Leave a comment if you have any questions, and be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.